So we have kind of the concept of root directory and home directory. The tilde, which you can always navigate to going cd tilde, that is always going to be your home directory. And if you ls there, you see your home stuff. You see this is my desktop. This is my applications. This is my documents. If I was to ls into music, I would see my music, which I don't think I've ever put something there. Oh yeah. So this is all my music apps, right? iTunes, GarageBand, etc. With code, it's common practice to store it in like a code folder or a dev folder. So if you're just storing yours like on the desktop or in this home folder, like that's okay, but I would say the most common practice is that all your code projects would live inside of like a code folder or a dev folder. So for me, that would mean something like if I'm in this root directory and I say I want to store everything in a dev folder, I would say mkdir dev, right? Make directory dev. And after I make that directory, I would ls to say, hey, did I even make that directory? And that dev directory is there now. And then every project I would create would be inside this dev directory. So I would never start a project or like clone something from GitHub if I wasn't already inside this directory. That way, if I ever want to find a project, I know exactly where to look. I use code as a convention. Yeah.
And are you able to do this in your file explorer?
You are able to do this in your file explorer, yeah. I would suggest trying more and more to use the terminal because it's going to set you up for success using Git. But you're able to use your file explorer to create like the folders. So I use mine in code. So if you look at my code directory, you can see I got a bunch of subfolders. I have Elm, Global Hack, Java, JavaScript, Julian Contract, LC101, and then a whole bunch of other folders where I store my projects. So for me, everything in this class that I'm doing, I'm storing in LC101. So I would cd into LC101. And then here in LC101 is where I'm going to store all of my projects for this course. So on your own computer, whenever you get to where you're storing the projects, or maybe you're on your home folder for now, if I want to clone down a project, first I make sure I'm in the right directory, LC101. And then I come over here and I say, I want to clone or download this project. I copy the link, and then I say git clone project. It'll clone into it. My computer, I have to provide a password. So it'll clone into it, and then when I ls there, what I just cloned, which was LC101 DOM events, that's there now for the first time. So now that I cloned that, I didn't clone it into like, all the contents aren't within LC101, they're within LC101 / LC101 DOM events. If I wanted to delete, LC101 DOM events and clone it again, I can give it a different name. So you see how I can say git clone, give it a name. I can say Thursday class. And now all those contents are within a folder called Thursday class. So it's the same Git repo. It's the same thing we're looking at here, but it's within a folder called Thursday class. I'm going to go back and actually make it LC101 DOM events. Okay. What else is helpful for the terminal? Well, ls is helpful to see what we have going on. pwd is a helpful command. That'll say, hey, what is my full file path that I'm working with? mkdir creates a directory, and then touch will create a file. So if you touch my new file, you'll have that new file there. Now for us right now, we have a project that is already pretty well formed. So here, when you have the project on your computer, now we're going to work on it within VS Code. So that's this next piece. So we have the project, we cloned it down using Git. Now when we actually change the text, we're going to change it using VS Code. So you can do two things. You can, open VS Code, which is what I'm going to do here. So So you can open VS Code, and this is an old project I had opened, so I'm going to say I want to open, and instead of opening a file, I'm going to open the entire project. So code, LC101, LC101 DOM events. There we go. And so you see it's kind of nice when you open up as a whole folder because you can actually see all of the stuff right there and like how they relate to each other. And if you wanted, you can create files within VS Code. So let's get to the actual lecture, which is us editing things within VS Code now. We'll start off first with a DOM example, right? So last time we went over HTML and CSS, and now we're going to add in a little bit of JavaScript. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, those are the three kind of like pillars of front end. So Kelly Hobson, the lecturer from last time, she always talked about the three major pillars. If you want to be a front end developer, you know HTML, you know CSS, and you know JavaScript. And so we learned a little bit of HTML and CSS, and now we're going to learn JavaScript. So here's our normal HTML form. It says, this is my title. These are the styles of the CSS that I'm applying. This is the body. This is what I want to show on the page. Everything within the body we're going to show on the page. And so we can open this page in our browser, and we see exactly what's on the page there. The title is, what is the DOM? We have a section called content. Within our section called content, we have a paragraph tag saying, okay, here's just some words about things. And then we include an image, and that image is referenced from our images/DOM tree images folder, and it's HTML DOM tree image. So now that we have this, we're going to talk a little bit about JavaScript, which is everything that's going on within this script tag. So everything within the script tag is JavaScript that will run when the page is loaded. And I can prove it by doing this. I can console log that out, and when I run this file, that code ran. How do I, where does it run? How do I check where it ran? Yeah, I can go to the developer tools. So on Chrome or Firefox or other browsers, you can navigate to the developer tools, and you can go to the console. And here in the console, it actually printed out hello world. So I know that my JavaScript was included. And I can change it just to prove that it'll update. So then I save the page, I come back here, I refresh, and it ran again, hello world 2. Using JavaScript, you can access things within the DOM. The DOM is like the structure of the page. So the DOM starts with a big tag of HTML, like a major tag of HTML. And then within HTML, there's this tag of body. And then within the tree of body, there's the tag of H1. At the same level of H1, there's this tag section. And then within section, there's a P tag and an image tag. So one of the cool things about JavaScript is you can actually adjust things on the page. So we can say, like in line 22 here, we can say, document, get me an element by ID. So go and actually get the element where the ID is main text. And this will search the entire document. It'll start at the top and it'll search all the way down. And it'll look for something where ID is equal to main text. And then it'll assign it to the variable P. And then you can do things with that element. You could say, you can append text to it. That's what this is doing in line 23. You can add text. So you can say, I want this P tag, which comes with words about things. I want to grab it, and I want to append text. I want to put text on the end of it. And we reload the page, and it starts here, and then it adds this part onto it. To prove that it doesn't start with that, right, if we commented this out, we're never grabbing it, we're never adding anything on, and just that first part shows up. We're never adding anything to it. One of the cool ways to explore the DOM, like explore what elements are there, is to use this tool called a debugger. Was the debugger in your homework assignment at all? So the debugger is kind of cool. If you put in debugger, just the word debugger into your code, into your normal JavaScript code, and if you have the browser closed and refresh the page, nothing happens, right? It just runs, but nothing special happens. If you open your browser tools with that word debugger, and you refresh the page, it shows the page, and then right when it hits that debugger, it stops. And now you have a live coding editor that's like after the page started loading, but before the page finished loading, which is kind of cool. Because now you can do things, now that the page is stopped, you can go to the console and you can say, hey, document, I want to get the element by ID, but I want to get section. Oops. Better? All right. So, content. So I can say, hey, I want to get the element content, and I just want to have it. So if I print out section here, whoa, and you can actually see it highlighted up there. So now I have control over this section. I can change things, I can remove stuff from it, I can play with it directly in the console, right here on the web page. I can even expand it and see what's underneath it. Now because this DOM is like a tree-like structure, once I have this element, I can get the stuff underneath it. So I can say, hey, here's the section. Give me the children. And it's going to say, hey, there's two children of this, right? There's a P and there's an image. And if I go back to my Visual Studio Code, what are the children under the section? Yeah, there's a P tag and there's an image. And so I can kind of play with all this stuff. So I can say, okay, give me that first child. And then with that first child, take it and give me the text content. And you can start accessing things within the DOM. So the important part about this, because you're going to get a lot of practice to access things within the DOM, is to understand that it's like a tree structure. And from the parent container, you can start getting stuff lower and lower within it. Yeah. And then also that this debugger tool is going to be really helpful in like pausing where you're at and then being able to click around and find stuff. Before we move on to kind of like our main example of this evening, are there any questions about the DOM and how it's like a tree structure? All right. And this image is an example of the tree, right? You have the document as a head, then you have HTML, and then you have sub things within the HTML. So let's do the assignment. Oops. The assignment is going to be an index.html. Normally, if you have a web page, like the home page is called index.html. So here we're going to say I want to open index.html. It's going to open a page. So what we're going to do together is fill out this page. We're going to fill out these 9.5 instructions. And so along the way, we're going to start with HTML, then we're going to include CSS, and then we're going to finally include JavaScript. Okay, number one, add a title to the web page. If we want a title to the web page, we want to change this title here. Where is that changed at? Yeah, in the head, but in specifically where? Yeah, right here. So head, title, and that's going to change everything here. So we can change this to LC101, DOM, and events. And then just like in JavaScript, when we make a change, we go back over, we refresh the page. Nothing changed here, but our header did change, LC101, DOM, and events. Number two, add a description of today's class to the web page. So we're going to do two things. We're going to add a title here, which we're going to make the exact same. Enhance the VS Code. So now we make an H tag that's LC101 DOM and events, and we want to add a description. And usually a description will be in like a paragraph tag. So a description of today's class is going over how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can make a single web page. So after we add that p tag, we would go over here, refresh the page, and there it is. Number 3, create an unordered list containing actions you can do when feeling stuck on coursework. Right? So this is back to HTML again. What is our tag for an unordered list? Yeah, UL. And then everything within it is an LI. So when getting stuck on coursework, what are things you could do? You could definitely Google the question. Oops. You could also throw your laptop. Yeah, we didn't say creating an unordered list of actions you should take. We just said you can take. Throw your laptop across the room. You could take a quick break, 10 minutes, walk around, get coffee, I think I heard. I heard use Slack, and I'm going to delete this one up here. Use Slack to ask a question. So you could Google the question, you could use Slack to ask a question, and you could use Slack, to ask your teammates or to ask an instructor or to ask your TF. I just want to point out that someone in the audience just said I was missing this right here. And one of the benefits, so I know a few people were editing their code in like Word or Notepad. One of the benefits about editing it in VS Code is it makes it really obvious by highlighting when you screwed up. That's like a huge advantage. And as your programs get more and more complex, the ability for VS Code to help you out is really nice. So we made a bunch of changes. We created that unordered list. We go back to our page, and there it is. To follow Kelly's example from last week, because these two right here are kind of like naturally grouped around like launch code instructions, I might put these in a section so that they're tied together in the page. There. Okay. 3.5, Git adding and committing. So now we're going to tie back in Git to our lesson. So when I'm inside the folder, if I want to know what changes I've made, I can do git status. And git status is going to show me, okay, these are the files that you've changed. So this says, hey, you changed domexample.html and it changed index.html. What branch am I on right now? Yeah, I'm on master, and it tells me right under git status. It says you're on branch master. So right away, we broke kind of one of the essential rules of programming, which is when you start work, you should be on your own branch. So whenever you pull down code and you want to work on it, you should be on your own branch. So what I'm going to do before I add and commit is I'm going to make sure I'm on my own branch. So I would say git checkout B, which says check out and create a new branch. And then I would name my branch. I would try to give it something descriptive. So I would say, I guess in this case, it could just be Will's solution. So I'd say create the branch Will's solution. And now it says I've switched to branch Will's solution. If I say git status now, it says I'm on branch Will's solution, and I still have changed these files. So now once I'm on a branch different than master, I can add and commit these files. You can add them one by one using the git add command. So you can say, hey, I want to add these files. I want to git add DOM example. And then after you add a file, you give a commit. A commit is just like a description of what you changed. So before I give a commit, I would go back to DOM example and I would say, okay, what did I actually change? And it looks like I changed pretty much just this p append text. Yeah.
Last class, we had the instructions get add dot. Does that grab all files or all changed files?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, what is get add dot, and why should you use get add dot versus get add the file name? So get add dot grabs all files that changed in your current directory, right? That dot means that's the directory you're currently in. So if I was to say, let's say I changed something else here, and it says both of these are changed. If I was to do get add dot, it's going to add every file here, and those files are going to be staged for commit. So in mine, you can see the difference between green and yellow. The green needed to be added, and now they're added, and now they needed to be committed. Most people, if all the changes are if all the files are part of the same change, then you can use like get add dot. But if you changed like two fully different things, then you might want to add and commit them separately. And then if we wanted to commit, you can use get commit -m, and that means I'm going to commit these and I'm going to provide a message. And my message is I completed instructions 1 to 3. After I commit, it's going to say, hey, you changed 2 files, you made 12 new updates, and you deleted 3 things. And so that's just, yeah, that's Git. Then I can continue working. So that was my stop point, and now I continue working. If we go to HTML, after we added and committed, number 4 says link a CSS document to the page. Our CSS linkage always happens within the header, and I actually already have one here. So we can include this link, which will link to this application.css file. So link the CSS document to the page and then turn all headers blue. So in our page, we have one header, which is an H1. And if we wanted to turn that blue, we would say, give me all the H1s and make them blue. After we make that change, we refresh the page. We see, okay, LC101 DOM and events is blue. The next instruction is turn the description of today's class red using a CSS class. So this means this description, we need to actually give it a class. So instead of turning all the p tags blue, we just want to target this one. So we can give it a class description, and then in our CSS, we can say, hey, go get that. You know, the word class probably isn't the best to use because we're talking about classes in CSS. So we'll just say LC101 description. And then we go over here. Notice how we target it. If you want to target a class, what do you put first? Yeah, dot. So if we want to say LC101 class, and we want to change it all to red, it'd be like that. Refresh the page, it didn't work. It's because of my naming. Oh. There we go. So now we change it there. Now somebody else said, when I asked, okay, what is the selector you use? And a lot of people said dot. There was quite a few people that used the pound sign, that said the pound sign. What's the difference between the dot and the pound sign? Yeah, class and ID. So class is using dot, and ID is using the pound sign. There's also one more difference, which Kelly mentioned last class, which is you can have multiple of the same class on a page. You can only have one of the same ID on a page. So if this was ID LC101 description, you couldn't like reuse it anywhere else. You could only use it in that one place. So we've added the CSS, right? We have our HTML, now we added a little CSS. Let's git add and commit. So what's the first thing I do to check what should be committed? Git status. It says what branch I'm on. It says what I changed. I in my head, I look at this and I say, does it make sense? Did I change the index.html and did I change application? Yeah, I did. So then I could say git add everything in the current directory. And then I could give it a commit message. I could say added red to the description and blue to the title. And it says, once again, okay, you changed 2 files, you made 11 insertions and 3 deletions. How do I push my code to GitHub? Right? What if somebody else wanted to be like what if somebody else is out there right now and they're like, I want to get back to where you are in the lecture. How do I share my code with them? Yeah.
You have to create a remote repository to sync it.
I have to create a remote repository. So remember, I cloned this down from a remote repository. So how do I, down. How do I get the origin of my Git repository? So the first thing you can always do is just check. So I think it'll be git remote get origin. Oops. Okay, so this is saying, okay, I have a remote called origin. So whenever you pull down a branch from GitHub that very first time, it's going to say your main remote is origin. So for me, it's saying that you pulled it down from feralw/lc11 DOM events. So if I want to push it back up there, I just need to push it back to origin. So I would say git push origin, and then I have to say where I want to push from, right? So I want to push to origin. So I'm saying git push to origin. Where do I push from? Yeah, my branch. Not like master, right? Because I didn't make any changes on master. I want to push from my branch. So just so I get the spelling right, I'm going to say, what is my branch? Will solution. And I'm going to say git push origin, will solution. And if you want to practice this and you've been following along, you can feel free to push your branch up too. We should see it pop up. Immediately in GitHub, it told me, hey, you just pushed a branch. You pushed a branch will solution. And if you wanted to look at the code, you could say, okay, show me that code.
Are we not allowed to push to it and get it?
It says the denied is being pushed. Are you trying to push to master? Are you on master branch?
No, get origin, and it says permission that your get is denied.
What branch are you on?
Well, I made one called will solution. So I'm on that branch.
Oh, maybe that's why it's like conflicting.
Oh.
Or maybe it is. I thought I had the settings. Let me check the settings quick.
If it's like private or something.
I thought I said don't restrict editing. But there could be like another setting that I'm missing.
I think it's just because I named it.
Try git checkout -b and then give your own name branch and then push it up and see if it pops up. If you're on that same computer, like your own computer still, and you're on like master branch, or just say you have all your branches added and committed, try typing in git fetch origin. And git fetch origin will actually go and pull down all the branches that are up here. And so then if you wanted to check out my branch exactly, you could say, hey, check out will solution branch on my local computer. And then I think this was part of the homework assignment. If you wanted to create a pull request, you can come over here to pull requests, and you can say, I want to create a new pull request, and I want to compare Will's solution into master. And it'll show you a readout of everything that's changed. It'll say, hey, you changed application CSS, you changed the DOM example, and you changed the index HTML. And then here on GitHub, I can say I want to create a pull request. I can give it a name. I can create a pull request. And if I wanted to, see, I'm actually blocking in case 2 people actually approve it. I can take you all and I can add you as reviewers. So that if you don't approve, you can say I deny it or you can approve it. So there's a lot of things you can do at GitHub as far as like seeing somebody else's code. So say I send this pull request to somebody in the front row and you're looking at it, you would look at files changed and you would say, do I want this in my project? And you would review it. You would review it right here. And then if you wanted to really test it out, you could pull it down to your local computer and test it out in the browser and see if it's what you want. So that type of like interaction as far as pushing up changes, looking at somebody's changes, that's what you would do multiple times a week, like as a software engineer. You would push up code, you would send it to somebody else saying, hey, can you review this? They would look at the diff, they would send you back yes or no, and they would approve it or disapprove it there in the browser. All right, JavaScript. So that's HTML and CSS, right? Now we have a web page with HTML and a web page with CSS. So how do we add JavaScript? We add JavaScript first by creating a JavaScript file. So this application.js, this is a JavaScript file. To link it in the body, after all the other HTML is rendered, we say, hey, I want to go get my JavaScript. So there's 2 ways to do it. You can either say, I just want to include a script tag, and then whatever I put in this script tag will just run. Bless you. And you can verify that by, once again, as somebody said, you open up the console. Or kind of the more proper, the way more people do it, is they give it a file. So they would say, okay, yeah, I want a script tag, but I want you to be loading from assets/application.js. Then every time you load it, everything within this application.js folder, it's all going to run. It's going to run immediately after you load the rest of the stuff. If you put the script tag above the rest of the HTML, it's going to run before everything else runs. So it's going to run wherever it is within that kind of hierarchy. So common practice is you put it after all the rest of the HTML. By the way, another cool thing about VS Code is if you say Command-Shift-P, you can actually have it format your document for you. So some of you who struggle with indentation or don't know if you're getting indentation right, you can do that for your JavaScript, your CSS, or your HTML files, and it'll format it for you, which is pretty cool. Okay. Number 7, link a JavaScript file to the page. Console log to prove it's added correctly. So the first thing I do is I'm going to run this. So I think I'm including the page, but I don't really know. So I would go back here, and I would say I'm just going to console log to see if I even included it. Okay, I did. It doesn't help to write a whole program if you don't know you're actually including it, because then you don't know if it's actually going to be doing something or not. How else could I see if I included my JavaScript? Where else could I look? So here, and it's real blown up, there's a Sources tab. And this Sources tab actually shows you all the stuff that loaded on your page. So it's showing me my HTML, and it's saying, hey, you also included this JavaScript and this CSS within your page. So that's another tool you can say, oh, did I actually include the file I wanted to include? I would encourage you, if you haven't, you can kind of play around with some of these. The Network tab is a way to, like, did you send a request or not send a request, right? This says, hey, you sent a request to get the index.html, and then you sent a request to get application CSS, and then you went and sent a request to get application.js. If you were to look at example to a regular page and look in this network tab and refresh it, you're going to see this is all the requests a normal web page makes. Tons of requests. So if you're ever wondering what your web page is requesting, if it's getting it correctly or not, you can go to this network tab. All right. We have successfully included our JavaScript in this LC101 DOM and events page. The next instruction is add a click event. When the title of a web page is clicked, say, you clicked me. So in order to add a click event, what's the first thing we need to do?
We need to assign the class ID to the button.
Yeah, first we need to we need to actually access that header, right? So this says when the title of a web page, I'm going to change it to be header. When the header of a web page is clicked, we want to do something. So we need to actually say, we need to give this an ID so we can target it. We can say, hey, take this ID of web page header, so then we can access it within the JavaScript. And then within JavaScript, we can say, get the element by ID and get the web page header from the document. And then once again, before we do a million things, we'll just say, print out the header to make sure we actually got it. We refresh the page, and there we have the header. Question?
Did you actually mean to put a bar, or was that at habit?
So can we use let instead?
Since that's what we're
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yep, you can use let.
Okay.
And then if we want to, oops. Actually, let me Google because this might have changed. How do you add a click event to an object? I know there's an on-click, but I think there's actually add event listener. So you can use the method onClick. So if I go header.on, you can see there's going to be an onClick show up. But there's actually also an on or add event listener. And this says, hey, I want to add a click. And then if someone clicks it, I want to do something. So the first thing I do is just to make sure it's working, I add a console log. So I said, give me this header, add a click listener. Every time you click, print out, hey, I clicked. I refresh the page, nothing ran. Well, something did run, right? The whole script ran, but nothing showed up because we haven't clicked anything yet. So we click that, and now that hey, I clicked is going to keep showing up. You can see the numbers show up next to it. Oops. If you were to have something else, then it shows up under there. So it's just showing, okay, yeah, it keeps clicking. It says you clicked me. We're going to make it a little different. We're going to say, after it does that, we want to alert. You ever wonder how some websites make really annoying pop-ups? If we refresh the page says you clicked me. So alert is going to show something to the user. It's going to say whatever you put in there, it's going to show it to the user. So there, we met that so far. You clicked me. And we did that by grabbing the element by its ID and then by adding an event listener. And And the last instruction of this exercise is during the click event of number 8, include the title from the event handler. So we don't just want to click and say, you clicked me. We want to say, you clicked me, LC101 DOM and events. We want to include the text from which we clicked. And to make that a little easier, or to understand that a little more, we're going to look at this method. And the method add event listener, it says, okay, give it an event, which is like click, and then give it a function. And the function, somewhere here, is going to tell you maybe it's not going to tell you here. There we go. Somewhere it's going to tell you that you're actually given the event in that callback. So in your event handler, you have access to the event. You have access to like what you actually clicked. So that means when we add an event listener, our function that we call back actually has the actual event right there with it. And we can print that out to prove it. So it says you clicked me, and then it printed this mouse event. It says, hey, you clicked me. You clicked me at 307 across and 51 down. And it gives you all this like kind of confusing information about like what type of click it was and all of this stuff. But it does give you some cool things like, hey, here is what you clicked. Here is the target that you clicked. Here is the children of the target you clicked. Here's the HTML or the text of the target you clicked. So it can start accessing these properties from which it clicked. And to really prove what we have, we can add that debugger back. And that's going to say, okay, after you click, print out the event, and then before alerting, stop. Stop and give me access to edit things. So I refresh the page, nothing happens yet. I click. It printed out the event, and then it stopped. And so now I can say, I can look at here, and I can try to get, oops. I have that event variable. And I can try to get that text. And I can do it here in the browser. So I can say event target. That's kind of getting close. Inner text, yeah. So then I can dive down to the text that I actually want. Event, target, inner text. And then I can add that to the end of my alert. I refresh the page, and that text of what I clicked shows up there. Why would it be useful to get information from the page? Like I wrote LC101 DOM and events. Why would it ever be useful to query the DOM and get information?
Tracks,
Say that again?
tracking usage or
Yeah.
navigation on a page?
You could like track usage, like where people are clicking, what people are doing, if your page is like leading them to where you want it to be. Where else? Yeah. It could be changing, yeah. The data could be changing, you don't really know. Yeah. What about like forms, right? People input forms all the time and you want to be able to get that data and do something with the data they're actually entering to you. So if people enter data into forms, you can use a script like this to say, hey, give me the data from your form and then let me send it somewhere. Let me do something with it. Because we're not hard coding this title, we can change this title, refresh the page, and it'll give the new page there with you clicked me. It looks like no matter how much I enhance, the alert is not going to enhance. All right, the last thing to do before we close out here, it's getting to 6:22. If you're looking for extra exercises, there's two things. There's two exercises here. One is to create a random number generator, and the other one is to say, after your page loads for 5 seconds, then insert a Giphy of the Backstreet Boys all over the page. So one thing you can do for that one is you can say window, on load, and then after everything loads, then you can say wait 5 seconds, and then just use this append. Remember this append? You can just append Backstreet Boys everywhere. So to close out, I think we have one last thing, which is just git add and committing. So I would obviously go back to my terminal and I would say, what did I change? And it would say you changed assets and you changed index. If I wanted to, VS Code actually helps me out by saying, like, you see all these blue and greens over here? That's VS Code telling me that you changed something. So if I go to index.html, it says you changed something, and I can click on this blue over here, and it'll actually give me what I changed. So I changed title to header. So that can be really helpful when you're working on a project for a long time, and you're like, what the heck did I actually change? Or something breaks and it was just working, and you're like, how do I go back, or what did I change? And if you want to revert changes, you can say, this change that I made, go back to what it was. And it'll go back to what it was previously. So I'll say git status, and I'm going to say, I want to add these files. I'm going to add my commit, which is my finished solution. And then I want to push it to GitHub. So I'll say git push origin, push from the branch will solution. And now the changes that I made should be visible within this pull request. And those most recent changes in application.js, those are now in application.js. All right, that was a lot. So now we got HTML, we got CSS, and we got JavaScript all at our disposal. And so the next 4 weeks of this class, which is finishing out the JavaScript portion, it's all about how can we use these 3 essential tools and start building web pages that people can interact with. I think Nick has an instruction, and then I better close this recording.